Top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Per tweet from Michael Benson, the WBC have reportedly officially ordered Savannah Marshall to defend her undisputed WBA, WBC, IBF, and WBO super middleweight world titles versus Jadeja Green next. Parties have until September 1st to agree to a deal or purse bids. They really don't have a lot of time.
July, more or less, just got started, and they have all of August.
It's really not a lot of time, and that doesn't give Savannah the liberty, the wiggle room to explore a rematch with Claressa Shields. Not that they were having much luck in that department anyway.
Nope.
Claressa is still insistent that the fight happen in America.
And it's still unclear as to whether or not Claressa can guarantee Savannah the kind of money she could make in the UK, in the US.
Can Dimitri Salita of Salita Promotions guarantee Savannah the kind of money that her own promoter, that Boxer, can guarantee her in her own neck of the woods? That was a stumbling block. It still is.
I'm more intrigued by this fight anyway. I'm more intrigued by Marshall versus Green than Marshall versus Shields too, because we already saw Marshall versus Shields.
Jadeja Green, Savannah's mandatory challenger by not only the WBC, but at least two other alphabet organizations. If Savannah don't fight her, she may end up forfeiting 3 of the 4 major titles she just won in her last fight.
She's got to take care of this.
And it's a dangerous fight, just like the Franchon Cruz fight was, with some noticeable differences. With Franchon Cruz, Savannah had to...
Franchon is a pressure fighter. She's going to try to keep you under pressure and play you close to the chest. So there are going to be a lot of moments where you have to open up and you have to fight her off, because if you don't, you're going to get outworked.
You're going to get pushed around, you're going to get bullied. With Franchon Cruz, Savannah had to throw more than perhaps she normally does, whereas with Jadeja, less is more.
Jadeja's next ring appearance is supposed to go down next month on the undercard of Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz. She's supposed to be fighting Olivia Curry.
Seems strange that just as Jadeja secures her next opponent, she's supposed to go into talks for another fight.
And a deal's got to get done by September 1st.
In any event, Jadeja Green is a somewhat different assignment than Franchon Cruz. With Jadeja, less is more. You know, with Franchon, you need more ferocity than finesse. With Jadeja, it's the opposite. You need more finesse than ferocity. This is not the kind of fighter you want to stand in front of too long.
Open up with too much.
She's a counterpuncher. To beat her, it's going to take a delicate balance of offense and defense. I think this is where Savannah Marshall has to use her height and her length to box comfortably from the outside, not opening up too much, staying behind the straight punches, and staying on her toes.
Jadeja is somewhat shorter than Savannah Marshall, with shorter arms. Thus, it's on Jadeja to get within striking distance of Savannah. Savannah cannot afford to give up her height and her length to trade punches in the pocket.
That might have went over well with Franchon Cruz, but not with Jadeja. Jadeja is a sharper and shorter puncher than Franchon Cruz, with more power. You don't want to sit in the pocket with her for too long. Thus, for Savannah Marshall to win this thing, she's got to use her height, use her length, move those feet, and box from the outside behind straight punches. Careful to counter Jadeja Green should she try to bust through the front door. For Jadeja, she's got to use head movement. Slip
the straight punches while coming forward.
Slip the jab, slip and hook.
Slip and counter, roll and counter, bob and weave.
She's got to keep her head off center. Keep her head off the line while closing the distance to get close to Savannah to land big punches. That may be easier said than done. I think both boxers, both fighters, pack a big enough punch that they can hurt the other woman.
They can.
Don't get the sense that either fighter can afford to be cavalier here, though. If Savannah is to remain this division's undisputed champion, it's really going to take more finesse than ferocity. 1 and 2 punches at a time from the outside on the fly.
Shooting that jab at an angle like she usually does.
Savannah may have more height and more length than most girls at super middleweight, but she doesn't stand up right. She's not stiff.
Static like Aline Cedar Rouge.
Fighting at an angle allows Savannah to roll any looping right hands, looping rights over the top.
She's nimble, on her toes, fighting at a slight crouch, chin tucked, able to roll any looping right someone might fire in her direction.
It's a great fight, genuinely intriguing. Another 50-50 fight for Savannah Marshall in that succession. From Franchon Cruz to Jadeja Green. That's a tough sequence of fights. In men's super lightweight news, a recent string of call-outs for reigning WBC champion Regis Prograis, Ryan Garcia said, "Regis, if you want to fight, please let Eddie know. I want that smoke. I'm confident I can do damage at 140. So if you want to make something happen, please contact my team. I'm dead set." serious.
You often hear it said in boxing that timing is everything. And now is not the time for Ryan Garcia to try his hand at a fight with one of the heaviest punchers at 140 pounds. He just got knocked out at 136.
Knocked out at 136 by a 135-pounder, a smaller man than Regis Prograis. You got stopped at 136, now you want to fight this guy at 140.
And don't talk to me about how Regis looked in the Zorrilla fight, because Ryan Garcia fights nothing like Zorrilla.
You can't make that distinction. Why the fuck are you even talking?
Garcia versus Prograis isn't next.
But Ryan Garcia, he did call him out, as did Jack Catterall, who said, "What's happening, Regis Prograis? Are we doing this or what? I will come to your back garden and put in the work, no problem."
A fighter who is more adept to the task of facing Regis Prograis, than Ryan Garcia. Jack Catterall, the man who unofficially beat Josh Taylor.
Jack Catterall, a southpaw like Regis Prograis, and for me and my money, a more fundamentally sound fighter than Ryan Garcia is here today. Ryan Garcia, who has enlisted the aid of Derek James.
We have yet to see what Derek James's version of this fighter looks like, but Jack, the last version of Jack that I saw,
Jack Catterall versus Regis Prograis, that makes for an interesting fight, a battle of the southpaws,
with at least one common opponent between them in Josh Taylor. We know that Josh, he gave Regis his first loss, and in some ways, he gave Jack his.
Most feel Jack unofficially won the fight, but on paper, Josh Taylor beat him. And I like the idea of Prograis versus Catterall. The problem is that Regis Prograis is currently under orders by way of the WBC. You heard that right. They've already issued out an order for him to satisfy his mandatory challenger in Sandor Martin. The same Sandor Martin that retired Mikey Garcia, the same Sandor Martin that made Teofimo Lopez look quite human ahead of the Josh Taylor fight. The same Sandor Martin who's an outside jabber, a stick and move guy, just like Danielito Zorrilla.
And he's a southpaw, just like Regis.
Just like Regis Prograis, just like Jack Catterall. There really are a lot of southpaws campaigning at 140 pounds.
There are.
In any event, the WBC have now officially ordered Regis Prograis to defend his WBC Super Lightweight World title versus Sandor Martin next. However, they will allow an exemption for a Prograis versus Devin Haney fight, which is close to being made according to Eddie Hearns.
That's right. Don't forget, Devin Haney's been in the running for a Prograis fight for weeks now.
Yet another peculiar order from the WBC, just like the Jadeja Green versus Savannah Marshall order. Jadeja having a fight on schedule, so does Sandor Martin. He's supposed to be in action this upcoming weekend on the 15th.
He's supposed to be fighting some nondescript guy named Arblin Kaba.
What makes these orders from the WBC peculiar, the one for Jadeja Green and Savannah Marshall, and the one for Sandor Martin and Regis Prograis, is that both Jadeja and Sandor Martin have fights on schedule. So one would think that the WBC would hold off on ordering any of these fights until after the outcome of these fights is decided. Jadeja Green's fight with Olivia Curry and Sandor Martin's fight this weekend.
It is strange that they're ordering these fights before the outcome of those fights is even decided.
In any event, they seem to be giving Regis Prograis a special exemption to fight Devin Haney, the lightweight division's undisputed champion, if a deal can be reached.
Regis Prograis was last in action opposite the ring Danielito Zorrilla, a statuesque super lightweight that happens to be a pure boxer.
An outside fighter, outside jabber with a lot of height and a lot of length as far as super lightweights go. And it just so happens that where Danielito Zorrilla is a pure boxer, so is Sandor Martin and so is Devin Haney.
All three of those guys are pure boxers. Subtle differences aside, all three of those guys have the same base style. They're all defensively minded, pure boxers.
For a counterpuncher like Regis Prograis, that's a problematic base style because a counterpuncher relies on his opponent to make mistakes. He relies on his opponent to throw so he can counter what they throw. Whereas pure boxers, they don't throw very much, and whatever they do throw, they throw from a safe distance.
They're hard to counter.
Because they're so defensively responsible. Long distance, long range, economic fighters that don't give you much to counter. Thus, it would be on Regis to give chase.
And we saw in the Zorrilla fight that he didn't look good doing that.
Trying to pin down the opponent so he can open them up is difficult because the opponent won't sit in one spot.
The same thing that made Regis Prograis look bad is the same thing that costed Danielito Zorrilla the fight that, well, he might have stayed out of harm's way and made Regis look human by staying on his bicycle the whole night. At the same time, he didn't mount any kind of offense. He didn't do enough to win the rounds.
It's the same underlying principle in the Sandor Martin versus Teofimo Lopez fight. It's the same thing. Sandor Martin in moving lateral,
Staying on the outside of Teofimo Lopez.
setting him up to walk him into punches, he made Teofimo look bad. There are similarities between Teofimo Lopez's base style and Regis Prograis, and in that way, Sandor Martin is yet another fighter that could make Regis Prograis look human.
Use your head.
There are similarities between Regis Prograis and Teofimo Lopez, and there are similarities between Sandor Martin and Danielito Zorrilla.
The silver lining for Regis is that while Sandor Martin is a pure boxer, an outside fighter, just like Zorrilla, he's not as tall a guy, not as long a guy, so it might not be as easy for him to stay on the outside of Regis's punches.
Because he's not as long and limber.
Though all the same, he is a moving target and he is an outside fighter.
Outside jabber and a southpaw, just like Regis Prograis. That's a tough sequence of fights for a counterpuncher who needs aggression to get off his best punches, his best shots. These guys are anything but aggressive.
So if Sandor wins his fight this weekend and Regis can't do a deal with Devin, he's gonna have to deal with Sandor.
Eddie Hearn says that a deal is close. A deal is close for a Prograis versus Haney fight.
We'll see how close we are to a deal or how close we're not, because Vasyl Lomachenko seems to be hinting at a Devin Haney rematch.
Past weekend, there was an exchange between him and Shakur Stevenson. Shakur said, "Yo, Vasyl Lomachenko, nothing but respect, champ. You deserve them belts. I hope you healed up and everything is all good with you. I think it's time for a real high-skill level chess match. I'm ready for a big fight, champ. Let's make something happen." To which Vasyl Lomachenko responded, "Shakur, thank you. I am okay, but I am sorry. I have unfinished business with Devin Haney."
Unfinished business. What does he mean, unfinished business? Unless you're going into a rematch with Devin, the business is finished.
Shakur Stevenson responded by saying, "I understand, champ, but if he ducks you like he's ducking me, it only makes sense for us to get it in." And I happen to agree. I happen to think that if there is no Vasyl Lomachenko versus Devin Haney rematch,
These two should fight.
I've long maintained that I think Shakur Stevenson is a better boxer, a better pure boxer, and a better boxer overall than Devin Haney. Moreover, I've long maintained that I think Shakur Stevenson will be the one that retires Vasyl Lomachenko, that if they do fight, Shakur's going to send him on his way.
Devin didn't win that fight.
In the eyes of many, he was given a gift decision. In the eyes of many, and I haven't soon forgotten, that the boxing community at large and many celebrities outside of it, they didn't see Devin win that fight, and I didn't either. I felt Vasyl Lomachenko won the fight.
They're always likening Devin Haney to young Floyd Mayweather. They're always saying that he's got all the makings of this era's Floyd Mayweather. Well, Floyd, in his day, whenever he had a close fight, he'd run it back. He'd do a rematch like he did with Castillo, like he did with Maidana.
If Devin Haney is supposed to be this era's Mayweather, then you know what to do. You've got to run it back with Vasyl Lomachenko, because there are a lot of people that are unconvinced. A lot of people who feel he didn't really win that fight, and they were very vocal immediately after the fight. I didn't soon forget, because I was one of them.
You got a gift.
Now, if he doesn't run it back with Vasyl Lomachenko, as Vasyl Lomachenko is suggesting that he has unfinished business with Devin, if there is no rematch and Devin moves up to 140 and takes on Regis Prograis, I'll take it. That's still a good fight, still intriguing, still dangerous.
Devin Haney is a pure boxer, and pure boxers characteristically give boxer punchers counterpunchers a lot of problems.
Devin Haney, like Danielito Zorrilla and like Sandor Martin, he's a pure boxer, but the subtle difference between them is that Devin doesn't spend quite as much time on his bike as those guys do. Those guys spend the majority of a fight, the majority of a round, on their toes, on the balls of their feet, moving lateral, using the ring, whereas Devin doesn't move quite as much.
Not as much as they do. In fact, Devin Haney spends a little bit more time in the pocket than the aforementioned fighters, than the aforementioned pure boxers, to his detriment, as I see he's quite vulnerable there.
It was in the pocket that Jorge Linares hurt Devin Haney. It's also in the pocket where, at least in my opinion, he was thoroughly outworked by Vasyl Lomachenko. Don't try to convince me of otherwise. If you think Devin won that fight legitimately, you're in the minority, my friend.
You must have been watching a fight from under a rock.
To try and tune out the world, tune out the boo birds and the boxing community at large that was screaming robbery immediately after that fight.
Devin got a gift, right?
Not the first fighter that got a gift, and he won't be the last, though in any event, the difference between Devin and Danielito Zorrilla or Sandor Martin is he spends a little bit more time in the pocket than those fighters do, and it is to his detriment because he's not very good there. He's actually vulnerable.
He's obviously not acclimated to 140 pounds like they are. He'd be moving up from 135 to 140.
That's saying that even if Devin Haney has the right base style for the job, there are other intangibles and other ingredients that he might be missing because he doesn't move as much as Sandor or Danielito Zorrilla. He's not acclimated to 140. I don't think he takes the best punch, if I'm being honest.
He has a propensity to try to trade punches in the pocket, even though he's vulnerable there.
It's a winnable fight for Regis Prograis. It's a winnable fight because if he can land on this guy the way that Jorge Linares landed on him, I think he can take him out. I think he could very well stop Devin Haney, who may have a stylistic advantage.
But he's still lacking in other areas.
WBC is giving Regis Prograis amnesty to make this fight. And if he does, well, this fight has more of a profile than, say, the Sandor Martin fight. Sandor Martin fight, if I'm being honest, I'm not crazy about it because in all likelihood, the aesthetic of that fight will be similar to the aesthetic of the Zorrilla fight. And the Zorrilla fight was a stinker.
That fucking fight sucked.
The boxer-puncher, the counter-puncher, versus the pure boxer seldom ever yields a pleasing aesthetic for the fight fans. Oftentimes, what the pure boxer does is stay on his bike the whole fight to stay out of trouble, not engaging that boxer-puncher.
They think that just by not getting hit, they're winning the rounds when they're not doing much hitting themselves because they won't sit down on their punches.
They think that just by doing laps around the ring and staying out of trouble, occasionally getting off a shot, that will be enough to win the rounds. A minimalist approach to boxing.
I fucking hate it.
I'm not crazy about a Prograis versus Martin fight, but Prograis versus Haney, I could go for that because Devin doesn't spend that much time on his bike.
He's a pure boxer.
But he doesn't spend that much time on his bike. It's murky right now. It's unclear as to what direction Devin will go in. Is he going to have a rematch with Vasyl Lomachenko? Is that what Loma is hinting at? Or are we really close to a Prograis versus Haney fight the way Eddie Hearn suggests?
We'll find out shortly.